Hi, family. Hello, new friends. I'm Nadia, and I am really a grateful recovered addict and alcoholic. And we had so much fun here last week. Bill and I thought we'd come back again. And it's awesome to see a lot of familiar faces and some of my friends and family from where I come from. It's awesome. It's awesome to be back here, Steve. Thanks so much for this platform and for everything that you and the service team have done here. It's been incredible. The resources on our YouTube channel are just amazing, and they've really proven to be some great sponsorship tools for me. And because I'm an AA nerd, history nerd, I just love your new great realities. There was just a little punt for you, Steve. Right. So we are right in the beginning of the book, and yep, we are on table of contents. And I'm sure some of you are like, what? Whoever even looks at the table of contents, unless got to go back through it once you've read a book. Well, you will not believe. I told you, I think that for those that were here last week, this book is a magic book. Even the table of contents has got something really, really funky going on. So let's go. Bill, you jump in anytime you want to. All right. So first and foremost, I want to let you know that this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, is one of the best-selling books to date. There are 30 million copies that have been sold. And here's some interesting information. I wrote this down. Hold on. The millionth copy of this book was given to Richard Nixon, President of the United States, in the 1960s. Okay. The 25th million copy was given to the prison warden of San Quentin on commemoration of the first prison meeting of AA. Isn't that cool? That is so cool. I love that. Sorry, I love that. That is just amazing. And then the 30 millionth copy of this magic, beautiful, beloved book of ours was handed to the American Medical Association on the annal when they declared alcoholism and illness. So there's just a couple of cool facts. And there's going to be a couple of more like that as we swim around the table of contents. All right, so we've got the table of contents. We have the chapter number and the chapter title, and then we have the page number.
Hey, Nadia.
Go for it.
You said jump in anytime. I want to say something based on what Steve announced at the beginning. If that's all right, Steve, it's on recorder. You can mute it later. I always give you the right to mute anything I say. But when the 12 and 12 was out, and I understand this is a big book compendium, but just what came out in Tradition 6 on page 155 of the 12 and 12, it talked about some of the things that we dreamed of, and they were talking about the fellowship of AA really in its infancy. Hospitals didn't like alcoholics, so we thought we'd build a hospital chain of our own. People needed to be told about alcoholism, so we'd educate the public, even write school and medical textbook. We'd gather up derelicts from Skid Row, sought out those who could get well and make it possible for the rest to earn their livelihood in a kind of quarantine confinement. Now, it hasn't gone that far, but listen to these next few descriptions. Maybe those places would make large sums of money to carry on other good works. We avoided that, thank God. We seriously thought of rewriting the laws of the land and having it declared that alcoholics are sick people. No more would they be jailed. Judges would parole them to our custody, hence court papers. We'd spill AA into the dark regions of dope addiction and criminality. We'd form groups of depressive and paranoid folks. The deeper the neuroses, the better we'd like it. It stood to reason that if alcoholism could be licked, so could any other problem. It occurred to us that we could take what we had into factories and cause laborers and capitalists to love each other. What I'm saying is, it realized when he was saying it's compendium, like we're not limited to whatever madness was destroying your life. This book, Alcoholics Anonymous, was our basic text, which contains the recovery program, is fulfilling the vision that they had, and they called it delusion back then. And I mean, this program is changing the world one malady at a time. Because I believe this, and I'll say this, and I'll be quiet. We'll get back into the book. The same year that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous came out, The Wizard of Oz came out. And for those of you who don't know, in the other parts of the world, I'm sure you do, but it was a movie. They both came out in 1939. And I think the message of both of them, if I understand it correctly, is for so long we've been taught to look for the God way beyond the clouds, that if we got the rules right, when we got to the end of the game, we'd find out if we were in the win, lose, or draw column, right? If you didn't get it right, you're going to be separated forever and burning in eternal hell. And what this book says as we get to it, and what that movie prescribed, is what we've been looking for all of our lives was deep within us. And I think this is the most current manifestation of God reaching out to man. And it started with a couple of drunks in Akron, Ohio. And look at the different afflictions or addictions that it's now drawing to this 12-step way of life, which if we follow the instructions, we find the great reality which has been deep within us all the time. And I believe that God could take something like Alcoholics Anonymous and use it as a blessing for the people who were seeking that relation that just seemed to be blocked by what we thought was way out there, when in fact it was deep within us. If that gets me banned from the platform, oh well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. It makes me think of tradition 3 in long form. Yeah, we'll jump over to that, Nana. That's exactly it. And that's what I love about this platform, is we get to speak about all the different delusions, all the different afflictions that bring us here, and that this is the solution. This is the solution. This book, it will help you solve all your problems, is one of the statements in this book. So back into the book, the preface. So what I think it's called, oh my word, what is it? It's those box brackets. So what I'm doing is I'm going to group the next couple of chapters to kind of give you the backbone of how this book has been put together. So the preface, the foreword to the first edition, the foreword to the second edition, the foreword to the third and the fourth edition, those are the history of AA and general information on AA. Then the doctor's opinion outlines the problem, the diagnosis. Chapter 1, Bill's story. Chapter 2, there is a solution. And chapter 3 is step 1. It outlines step 1. It is a third of the 164 pages that contain the 12 steps. 1/3 of 164 pages is dedicated to step 1. And I know for me, my step 1 is what keeps me sponsoring. My step 1 is what keeps me in these rooms. My step 1 keeps me living in my disciplines of step 11, step 10. I had a solid step 1, but I did not get it on the first go. I did not get it on the first go. It was just a matter of, after 7 years of being in and out of these rooms and trying it Nadia Anonymous and trying it on my way, I always used to call it Nadia Diesel. My truck would eventually run out and we'd crash into a wall, or we'd, fly off a bridge or whatever, and it was when someone who was properly armed with the facts, whose whole department shouted that they had a solution, marched me through these pages, that I got to understand what my disease was. And I got to concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic and I needed a solution. I needed a solution desperately. I couldn't drive my van, my truck anymore. Chapter 4 is step 2. The solution. the solution. Are we willing to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity? Because chapters 1, 2, and 3 outlines the insanity. And then there's the solution in We Agnostics, a beautiful, beautiful chapter that invites you and your newcomer and the returning relapser and the old timer that's been in this program for years without having surfed through these pages, an option of finding a God of his own understanding. And Bill gives us many, many words in We Agnostics that, because God gets a lot of us with our hackles up, right? A lot of us come in here with a lot of prejudice. And Bill gives us tons of nouns in We Agnostics, tons, and characteristics of a power greater than ourselves. Then chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7 is how to get into the solution. That's chapter 5 is steps 3 and 4. Chapter 6 is steps 5 through to 11. Chapter 7 is the first part of step 12. There are 3 parts to step 12. That is the charge. That is the actual, that is the instruction. So having had a spiritual awakening, so that's the cost. What's the word that, I'm sorry, I'm running out of a word here. Okay, I'm going to come back to that. Please bear with me. Then chapter 8, chapter 9 is the third part of step 12, practicing these principles in all our affairs. And chapter 10 is the second part of step 12. And then chapter 11, a vision for you. And that is the vision that Bill was referring to, Nana, as well, from the 12 and 12 in a vision for you. And the way that that chapter ends gets me in tears every single time. Every single time, because there's a line in there that says, you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. Tells me that I'm going to meet people who were sponsored by the first 100. And I have met those people. I work with those people. I work shoulder to shoulder with those people. I've been sponsored by one of those people. We get to meet them in this journey. It's amazing. And not only that, their spirit is with us. But anyway, I'm going to go for a tangent there. Let's not. I'm going to ask Bill to jump in here, please.
What do you want me to say? Aren't you going to start reading?
No, we're not going to start reading. What is your on the outline of the chapters that we've just mentioned?
You did wonderful. I'll tell you something that I'll pass on. I don't know if this is part of the compendium. Remember when we read how it works at most meetings and the 12 steps, and we talked about that this morning because it's so vogue in meetings right now that sometimes people are like Nadia said today, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say when the meeting starts or what's the topic or and I forget that is only a description of the action taken by the people who wrote this book. So we sit in meetings, and a lot of meetings, they read the promises, and of course the newcomer to go along and do the AA chant says, we think not at the end of the promises, as if that's the answer. And what I mean by that is I am not a part of the we till I do what they did. And in saying that about the description of the steps are what is read and how it works. That is not the steps. The steps are neatly outlined, like Nadia just said, in the chapters she laid out. It's an instruction and how to apply. And the principles, I was thinking about this, you may not come to believe at step 2. That doesn't matter. It's a principle. In other words, step 2, when it talks about coming to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, if I'm restored to sanity at step 2, I really don't need to do much more work. But we find out in the book The sanity is restored at step 10. So I may not experience the evidence of these principles. And I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're looking, sometimes we run these people through it and we want them to check off mechanically, methodically, or numerically the physical action, forgetting that these are spiritual principles. So what I'm saying is I may not come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity till much later in the game. It might not happen at step 2. Like it says, the belief, the real belief there in we agnostics is we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility in our life the way we were living it. That's sufficient enough to move on through this process. So it's like they told me you can be an atheist and agnostic. I sponsored a witch once, I mean, I told them just don't put a spell on me and I'll take you through the steps. It doesn't matter what you believe. If you will apply these actions to your life, by the time you get to step 12, you will have been contacted. You'll know who it was that we were coming to believe in. So if you ask for anything, you laid out the description. But remember, these are spiritual principles. And sometimes what happens is I get in with my carnal or mental aspect that takes place in my head. And I think, okay, I've taken step 1. What does that mean? Did you hear what Nadia said? Her step 1 connection or her step 1 experience compels her into 12-step work, compels her into seeking through prayer and meditation to improve that relationship with the power that set her free. So they're kind of built on each other, but sometimes I offer them as something as if we're reading something out of a math book. And although it's a textbook, I think it's a spiritual vortex. So you asked me to jump in. I don't know what's going on. They came back from last week, Nadia, so they're sicker than me. And I don't know if that helps or not.
You're doing great. You always do. I love that. Bill, when I sat in those meetings, when I first came in, there were all the preambles, right, were on the table and they were laminated. Nobody was reading chapter 5 out the book. Nobody was reading the 9-step promises out the book. Everybody was passing these laminated cards around. So there were no books on the table. There was just these laminated cards, right? And then they read how it works, and I'd hear the steps being read, and I'm like, cool. And then I'd go for my dentist appointment the next day, and I'd be like, step 5, it's just gone out of my head. Anyway, we discuss, with God,
Admit it
ourselves,
to
and another.
God, to ourselves, and
Yes,
to
thank
another
you.
human being.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just remembering the absolute futility of what I was doing and how those people must have been so appalled. I was just doing step 5 with strangers, like, hey, I'm a drug addict and I'm in AA and I'm doing the 12 steps, and they must have, I don't even know what they missed. And then step 9, making amends. I was running around sending WhatsApps and phoning old friends and old boyfriends. My problem was that I was reading, like you just said, that maths textbook, and I thought there was the 12 steps. I thought that's what we did. And then I did the 12 steps, and I've done the 12 steps. It's not the case. It's not the case.
And as
the
it
whole
was
purpose
brought up,
yeah.
as it was brought up this morning, and Steve, I don't know, this is my first time doing anything like this. Not that I haven't moderated a big book study, and people used to come from miles around to see if I'd make a mistake. I had a microphone. But I want to say something. Someone comes into their first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and because it is so commonplace, and it certainly wasn't done here, because we're going to get to it, but it's commonplace to have all these readings at the beginning. There are actually some people that know they got 10 extra minutes to get to a meeting because of all the stuff that we do at the beginning of the meeting. But if you signed up using math as the example, if you're in the first grade and you're taking basic math and the professor comes up and opens up the book of calculus, you are going to be so far behind from the beginning that it would be overwhelming. And what we do is we read how it works, which is chapter 5, which 60 pages into the book, plus the doctor's opinion and all the information that we study here. And then we read the 9-step promises. Shit, most of the people in AA don't get the promises if they had to do all the work up till that point. Because it's easy to come in here when I'm trying to impress you and convince you that I belong here and tell you all the capers that I committed, how I found receipts out in the parking lot of Walmart or Target, came back in, taped them to an empty box, got my money, and then went to the dope hole and traded in my Home Depot card for 50 cents on the dollar. But why don't we ever hear from the podium how you went to Home Depot and paid them back, how you went to Target and Walmart? It's because the stuff that I use to convince you that I'm sicker than I believe I am never gets addressed. Yet we run around here talking about 2 weeks later, I'm a recovered alcoholic and I haven't even made any amends yet. Why would I be entitled to get to the pot of gold without following the rainbow? And I think sometimes we sell a false narrative, and it's not the newcomer's fault. Hell, if I walk into a math class or to basic Spanish and you're teaching Spanish 400 level, I'm going to tell you that I hate Spanish or that I can't learn a foreign language. And the fact of the matter is that I didn't have proper training. And usually what I resent or what I think that I'm not good at is something I don't understand. And so what I'm saying is we come in and we bombard them with second or third generation recovery at their first meeting. Wouldn't it be simple to read maybe in my home group, and I'll say this and I'll be quiet again, I think. At my home group, they never read anything. They invited people who had taken the 12 steps, had an experience to get up and in a general way, share what they used to be like, what happened, and what they are like now, and followed the instructions in chapter 2 in their own way, from their own point of view, and in their own language, how they establish a relationship with God. Because that's what it's about. Now the group's 75 years old, and they read the preamble. That's all they read. It's not to bombard the newcomer whose mind is warped with a whole bunch of information and say, hey, guess what? This is a classroom. This is anything but a classroom, although we learn here. This is a spiritual atmosphere where the grace abounds. And sometimes I think, like much it was said in some of the churches I've gone to, and it was written by the master in the master's book a long time ago, we kill people with the letter of the law. We keep the spirit out. And we can't afford to do that in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's something happening here. You don't get to AA by mistake. You know what I mean? So, and I can't read anyhow. So,
Oh my gosh, we're going to have a lot of fun. Yeah, I can see it. So, what you just said now about how they did these meetings, people walked in, their experience, strength, and hope, how they got a relationship with God is at the bottom of this title page. After all these chapters, we then have personal stories for identification. Yes, I felt like that. Yes, I thought like that. Yes, I did those things. Yes, this could work for me. And
incidentally, Nadia, when you said, but we will not have the benefit of meeting you, and it says we can't say that for sure. The fourth edition, I actually a member of my home group stories in this book. And if you'll check out on WhatsApp, there are a lot of people in parts of the book that are still alive whose stories in the big book that they invite in to share. In other words, like they're a celebrity, you know what I mean? But the point being is when it said that, that's how visionary it was. And they changed in each one of these editions. And the fifth edition will soon be out. And what it says is to reflect the current membership. So I'm sure we'll have a lot more of the identifiers and the mixtures and the mentally ill and all that they might have not put in the first edition to protect the sacredness of their small little fellowship that they didn't know if it could stand the test of time if a whole bunch of crackpots came in. But the stories in the back of the book get current. You could be sitting with someone next to them in a meeting whose story's in the book, and you wouldn't know it. And ironically, there's no names attached to it. If you didn't know who the person was or found out, you wouldn't know whose story's in the book. So guess what? We will surely meet some of them as we trudge this road to happy destiny. So it says God will see to that, not us.
I love that. I love that. And now from that awesome piece of like revelation, which is like that's why I get so emotional because I know that I I will meet them along the way, is another promise at the bottom of this title page. Dr. Bob's Nightmare, a must read. A must read. It's one of the first personal stories. Dr. Bob, a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. The birth of our society dates from his first day of permanent sobriety. Highlight that, sparkle it, tag it. Permanent sobriety, June 10, 1935. Another promise. So we're 3 pages into the book, and we've got 2 promises already. Thank you. Thank you, God. Thank you. And just a little bit of it's like a tidbit of history, a little bit of interesting information. Time magazine, for its first publication in 2011, placed this book on the 100 most influential books ever written. Their first publication, they spoke about our book, and they placed it in the top 100. Pretty cool, right? There's a lot of really cool accolades out here. And now I've learned something about the Wizard of Oz.
And you guys
as
see on
well.
the page, the page right before the contents, at the bottom, if you have a 4th edition, I suppose if you want me to go yank out my 3rd edition, I will. But if you notice, it's the Library of Congress control number. This book has been placed in the Library of Congress in the United States as the top. What Nadia was talking about. Time magazine is a publication, so they can say whatever they want. They could say Muhammad Ali was the greatest boxer ever. I don't know, because it isn't the end of time yet, but at least up till that point, he might have been. But this was actually established in the Library of Congress in the United States of America in the top 100 books. I'll look up the number real quick, but I want to say it was around 50. And it might be higher than that. But to be in the top 100 books, when you think of how many tens of millions, maybe more books have been written and published since they started publishing books, that's a pretty big deal. But it's changing lives. And I have a feeling that the more fellowships that are established, when we break down the barriers, I'll say this too, as long as you got me on my opinion mode, or at least what's been disclosed to me. in our literature, it talks about, we believe that the realm of the spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never forbidding. And one of the fellowships I go to manifests that into reality. They don't care how you got here. And I'll say this, and it was almost, it killed. I spoke at a meeting from another fellowship. I don't know if we're supposed to say that here or not, but it was this, it's named after a specific substance, but it's not a substance specific program. And then I think about the name Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I was coming around here, the people were so protective of the traditions, which they really misunderstood, in my estimation. I could be wrong. But what they tried to do was limit what came out of my mouth based on what I did prior to getting to my first AA meeting. And sometimes they think that can kill some of us, or force us to wink and blink and say, well, when I was smoking alcohol through a pipe, please don't insult my intelligence. How are you going to smoke a liquid through a pipe? I know what you're talking about. Say what you did. And incidentally, in our book, and I'll give you a little bit of information that'll either get me in trouble with Steve or it won't. One of our concepts has the concept of unanimity, which means for anything to take place in Alcoholics Anonymous, it has to meet a unanimous vote. A little better than 2/3 of the fellowship must agree. And then they have a dissenting opinion gets to be heard before the vote is passed. So what that means is, on this meeting, there's 23 people. Say 17 of us say, yes, we want Bill to go. But 6 of you say we want him to stay. He kind of makes us feel healthy. Well, then they would say to the 6 that did not go along with the majority at the time, Why do you say that? And then the dissenting minority would share their experience or their thoughts, and then they would re-vote again, which could change the vote. If it's still passed, then it was passed into law. I say that to say this. There's another page in our fellowship that's quoted a lot. It's out of our big book. They quote 417. It used to be 449 in the third edition. In the third edition, it was called Dr. Alcoholic Addict or Dr. Alcoholic Addict. And what happened is they changed the name of the story to Acceptance Was the Answer, and they moved the position from where it was in the book in the third edition to where it now is in the fourth edition. I say that to say this. Dr. Paul described every chemical that he did, and he described exactly how he did each chemical, talking about injecting intravenously sodium pentothal, taking pep pills, uppers, downers, in betweeners, described everything with specificity. And the consenting majority of Alcoholics Anonymous says, we like the story. We're going to leave it intact. We're just going to move it in the book and change the title. If they can put something in our publication where someone could come in here and be alcoholic and have all these other symptoms and openly share them and get AA as a whole to agree that nothing needs to be changed, then when you ask one of us who started off drinking, and I don't care what you started off, if you have alcoholism, I don't care what you did, if it's part of your story and how you affected the relationship with God, why would I try and shut you up and then blame it on, well, this is tradition, singleness, and purpose? That has nothing to do with tradition 3. Tradition 3 says we don't get together and go out there and tell a heroin addict to come to AA that we have a solution for his problem. But if someone shows up at the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's not our job to disqualify them based on what they did before they got here. It's our job to say, welcome home, because we have to believe that the Father who presides over us all brought them to us. So it's real easy when we get our human touch in, and we could do as much damage as the myriads of religion that are killing each other off in the name of one God. So thank God we desperately need each other, and that doesn't happen here. But really, this format and a lot of things that are going on now is saying, guess what? Our fellowship is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding. We believe it is open to all men. And I believe, like in one of our traditions, when the guy said the cross-dresser came in was a black heroin addict wearing tutus and foo-foos, what would the master do? What would God do if one of us came to him broken by whatever form of brokenness there was? He wouldn't turn us away. We have a responsibility statement, which maybe I give a lot of lip service to. I am responsible when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA to always to be there. For that, I am responsible. We do that everywhere but in AA, don't we? We start to disqualify our very own based on differences. And all we need to do is find the spiritual separation. And we know that that's the brotherhood that God said to us. And I'll tell you one more thing, and then I probably will really be quiet. How do I know who God's going to bring the message through? I read another book where he talked to a prophet through a donkey. I can't afford to send anyone away because I don't know who God's going to use to give me the message. I didn't mean to get all that moved. Thanks.
Page 159. Come, jump over here. Come with me to page 159. Let's go to the bottom of this page. It became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone or everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Aside from fellowship and sociability, the prime object, we've lost sight of this, was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems, or a new person who can bring me a message from our Father. Cool. Let's go back. Now we've done the table of contents. Well done. Guess what, guys? We're going to the forward to the first edition. Yes, some of you are probably rolling your eyes. You can keep rolling your eyes till we get into the juicy bits of the book. I'm telling you now, there's plenty going on here. Plenty. And a lot of what Bill has shared with us tonight is lying in these pages. You're doing great, my brother. I love doing this with you. It's amazing. Thank you. Forward to the first edition. Page Roman numerals XIII. That is the number 13. Oh, this I read this first little paragraph at my we have a little big book study that we do on a Sunday as well, but it's super informal. We sorry, let me just read the squiggly writing. This is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous, men and women, are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show, not tell, not instruct, not run through a maths class, to show others precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Just in case you were wondering, what's this book all about? This is how we did it. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, this is what Bill was saying, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. I came in through AA. I sponsor Al-Anon. I sponsor overeaters. I sponsor sex and love addicts who can take it or leave it. They can take a glass of wine and take it or leave it. The moderate drinker. But they cannot, they plot murder of their lover if they dare talk about leaving them. The obsession is there and the allergy is there. I get to take people who are not alcoholics through this work, and they have a spiritual experience. They get to have a relationship with God, a God of their understanding. I've seen this with my own eyes, and it was because I was in the rooms that Bill was just talking about, where we were meeting for anybody who suffered from the disease of alcoholism, and that is the disease of self. I can see we've got another 12 minutes. Bill, please go ahead. That's such a juicy paragraph.
Me? Well, I'll tell you what, Steve, I don't know, I almost want to text Steve and say, I've been to some of your guys' platforms and they're very educational. Me, I'm very feeling wise. I mean, we could teach the book, but something just came to mind when you said that. In the spiritual experience in the back of the book, it talks about, and it's reiterated in the 12 and 12, when it talks about raising the bottom. And I was just thinking, when Nadia said, when they said, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages at all. And if I'm looking at it from outside, I'm saying, okay, you're a bunch of washed up drunks that aren't drinking. But what happened to Bill Wilson in that hospital room was so electrifying that it couldn't be harnessed or stopped. The benefit to Alcoholics Anonymous being on every corner, everywhere you go, is that if you have the symptoms of alcoholism, you can come here. And like it says, we saved you the last 10 or 20 years of literal hell. But by the same token, the disadvantage is this: if you haven't been cast into outer darkness, then when the light comes on, you can't experience that level of lightness without doing the work. I don't believe that God withholds his grace or his light shining in our lives. But it says, why is it that it seemed like it when this book was first published, or the stories in the book that we're going to read seemed to deal with low bottom cases? Here's a news bulletin. There weren't anything but low bottom cases at the end. These were people who were being placed in asylums, was permanently locked up because there was nothing they could do for it. So when you get someone who's in the grip of an illness that's driving them mad, and all of a sudden they're exposed to something like this, how could they not help but to shout it from the rooftops? Now what happens is I come in here, I get a DUI, I like AA, I meet some of the symptoms, and what I do is I don't realize that the way of life they're talking about is not that it's a not drinking society, a fellowship in AA. It's a fellowship of spirit. And just because AA is so, like I said, it's a household name. I mean, everyone knows who AA is now. But how about when this book was being published and this forward to the first edition comes out, there's less than 100 sober alcoholics on the globe, most of them with less than 2 years sober. I mean, most of the people in this room are sober longer than the people who wrote the book. Thank God they had the vision to not say, hey, guess what? At 3 years sober, this is what you're going to go through. And when Bill Wilson had at best 4.5 years when this was published, that was the limit. What visionary to say in step 10, what we really have is a daily reprieve. He didn't say we got a 4.5 year reprieve. We have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of that condition of spirit. It's just amazing, but there's so much to it. So if you don't understand why our way of life, it's not arrogant when they say this way of life has its benefits to all. It's because they had been in the presence of God. They had been contacted and they couldn't deny it. It wasn't something educational that they got taught in CCD. They had an experience of spirit that was real, that changed them from the inside out. So when they're talking about this, they're talking from experience. This is not theory. I don't know if that said anything, Nadia, but you asked.
Yeah. So Bill said that what we have is a daily reprieve. Let's go look and see where he got that from, right? Because it could be a lot of stuff that he's saying tonight that's just from him. That could be scary. I've been around with him long enough. It could be scary. But this man's speaking big book. He is speaking big book, and that is the truth, right? So let's go look at what he's just spoken about. Page 85, the second paragraph. In the middle of that paragraph, it says, yes, it says recovered. And oh, there's a lot of people in those rooms going, we're not recovered. It's not, you're never cured from this thing. We're recovering. And then, if you're in fit spiritual condition, you just keep quiet and say a little sick man's prayer for them a couple of times. Or you can, after the meeting, take them over to this page and say, guys, actually what it says here is what we really have is a day reprieve. You know what a reprieve is? When someone's going to death row and they get a day extra from being strapped in for that injection. When it's been raining for weeks in the UK, raining, and those May spring blossoms come around, they get a reprieve. That grey, cold, blustery weather, that's a reprieve. Daily reprieve, guys. We get that contingent. Here's the deal. Remember, I'm an alcoholic and I'm an addict, and I want the deal. What, like, I'll get something. What do I get in return for it? What do I have to do to get it? Okay, that's, I don't know if you're anything like me, but that's how I roll. So it says here, I'll get a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. not just going to meetings, not calling my sponsor, living in the disciplines of step 10, because step 10 gets me to practice these steps throughout the day. I'm powerless. I wake up in the morning, I'm powerless. God help me. I know that there's only one that can help me and restore me to sanity. Throughout the day, I watch for resentment. I watch for fear. I watch for dishonesty. And when they crop up, I ask God to remove them. Our spiritual condition, the maintenance of that, lies when we are living in steps 10, 11, and 12. That's our daily reprieve. That's when we live in a recovered state.
And that's our responsibility. In other words, we know that it's God who's keeping us sober, but if it was all on God, I wouldn't have to do those things that were just mentioned. There's specific instructions, and at the beginning of the meeting, when Nadia said, we don't tire so easily, what time do you go to bed and what time do you wake up? That's at the end of step 11. After we get through this work, it tells us after we've made a conscious connection with this power, we alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us through the simple way we have just outlined, which I believe is 84 through 88, but specifically 86 through 88. The daily reprieve comes in step 10. To continue to seek a improved contact or a greater consciousness comes in step 11. And then the rubber meets the road. It was said of Bill Wilson when he had that experience in Towns Hospital, and I think I mentioned it last week, but I repeat myself a lot. Sometimes I need to hear what I have to say. You know what I mean? But it said if you would have tried to chain him down, not only would you not have to compel him for sharing the experience, you couldn't stop him. You will know when you've had a spiritual awakening, because all of a sudden, when someone who has absolutely nothing to offer you of any value in any facet of life comes in and you are compelled to help them, the question will now not be, as it was with me all the time, holy shit, someone wants me to do something for them. My first thought was, what's it going to cost me if I say yes? A psychic change or an awakening of the spirit is this. When someone needs help, my thought now becomes, what will it cost them if I say no? That is a total 180 shift from a person who's narcissistically, degenerately self-centered. What can I do to help you? And it is in giving that we receive, but we're no longer giving because we know we're going to receive. We give because we've been changed. And in step 11, we grow closer and more into the image and likeness of our Creator. And everything that God creates gives. Just look outside when you breathe the air, notice the sunshine or the water. We didn't make that stuff. It was here for us when we got here. Thanks, Nod.
I've had so much fun tonight. Thank you. And I'm like buzzing. I think we've come to the hour. I'm just let me just see what my fellow service members where they are. Steve, we good? We're going to call it a night. I'm not going to dive into the next paragraph. So we're going to line it out here and we're going to meet back here next week. What we'll do now is just handle some questions and answers. Let's see. Out of my little bit of experience, I'll just take you back to the book. Thank you, Bill. This was awesome. Thank you all for being here and for lending us your ears.